A dark mist fluttered around my brain, reflecting odd colors onto my closed eyelids. A small hint of a dream. Rising and falling movements pushed through my sleep leisurely, until a sweet cloud in my mind called me from my slumber. I groggily opened my eyes, squinting to see in the dim light of dawn. Where am I thought before a small gasp escaped my lungs. I was in the air, about 200 trees above the ground. It took me a moment to remember everything and how I was flying. Actually flying. I glanced up to my back, wings carrying me forward in rhythmic flutters. My wings. It felt so good to roll it over my head. I have wings now. I'm not a monster anymore. I yawned and gazed to the ground before me, a gratified smile resting on my face. In the distance, the sun slowly pushed its way above the horizon, outlining strange rectangular shapes in its orange light. Buildings. My heart pounded in my chest as my wings pushed me closer, inch after inch towards the kingdom. Sagara. I had no idea we were only one flight away from it. The kingdom was vast. Its main area of stone buildings would have been enough to house at least 200 flocks, and on top of that there was a wide expanse of little white dots that were likely small stone huts. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the size of it. I knew it would be big, but this was stretching in all directions, farther than I had thought possible. In an instant, my wings tilted, throwing off my balance and jerking me forward slightly. And then I started to fall. Are they not working anymore? What happened? I tried to flap them, but they wouldn't do anything. They just stayed trapped in a halfway folded angle. My throbbing brain slowed slightly when I realized I was just descending. After the initial shock wore off, it was quite an exhilarating feeling. Wind whipped past my feathers, and all I could do was try to keep my eyes open, despite the wicked fast dust that was threatening them. The kingdom inched closer with every second. Now I was close enough to see the stone's vague details in the rising sun. Surely they must have started the sunrise ceremony by now, I thought, skimming the kingdom for their statue of Kairos. But I failed to find any, not even one. This kingdom really is evil. A chill crept up my spine. I thought it would have gotten better after such a long time. Though the kingdom looked so close, it took me an eternity to finally reach it, and by the time I did, the sky was light and the sun was high. Any sunrise ceremony that existed would have already ended by now. I glanced around. The streets were filled with dragons whisking this way and that. Still, a plethora of dragons made their way on the ground, refusing to fly as much as a flutter over the crowded way. Why? Back in the flock, everybody flew. It was practically punishable by the chief to be caught walking with your talons. I pushed through the dense wall of dragons, completely unaware of where I was going, simply staring at the new world around me. Tall stone buildings rose up from the ground. They were quite odd, with entryways on the ground instead of above on landings, as well as a flowing curtain that blocked our view into the nest. In our flock, nobody got privacy. Secret keeping was something that broke trust, therefore destroying our unity. I cast a glance around at this large, bustling place. Here nobody laughed or talked. Here they just moved. It's hard to imagine how a place like this could even be unified in the first place. Along with stone nests, strange water-filled lanterns lined the streets, littered with long, twisting plants. I was about to keep observing my surroundings, maybe find a place where I wasn't just standing in the road, when the necklace's sweet mist filled my mind again. Little eclipse, the voice whispered, and I was immediately pulled away from my thoughts, existing only in that simple state of bliss.
I brought you here, and now it's up to you to carry out your part of the deal. The prince lives in the palace, located in the center of Sagara. Scout the area for today, and when the night falls, I will direct you where you need to be.
The hiss of his voice echoed through my mind, dissipating slowly. I bobbed my head up and down rhythmically. Scout the area. Got it. I glanced quickly around, still not knowing which way to go, but getting to a place that wasn't crowded was my first priority. I walked, trying to get somewhere quieter, but the crowd pushed me to and fro. Someone bumped into me on my right, another dragon whisking by on my left. Dragons crisscrossed in front of me, but then someone stopped. I love your wings, she said before moving on her way. It was a miracle I even heard her. My heart was filled with warmth as I looked back at my wings, which were sparkling in the sun. I smiled and continued as well, the crowd seeming to slow a bit as I moved. A couple more dragons complimented my wings, then another, then another. It was weird, going from dragons hating me all my life to now being showered in compliments. Those wings are gorgeous. Oh, your wings are so pretty. Those are some beautiful wings. But all of them were gone before I could say anything back. I was grateful they were, though, so I didn't have to say thank you. Besides, I wasn't sure I liked the attention all that much. I kept my head low, watching my talons as I walked. I really needed to stop doing that, though, as I bumped into something hard. A loud crash echoing through my ears. A noise that could only be one thing: broken glass. Sorry, I said, jumping back.
No, I was the one who jumped up on you.
The dragon laughed and bent down to pick up the glass. She was a very interesting dragon, to say the least. She spoke with a slight accent, and I'd never seen anyone like her. For starters, she was a brilliant white color, with orange and yellow feathers burning the edges of her wings and tail. She had strange scribble-like patterns all over her, but her most striking feature was her feathery frill that bunched up around her neck. I stared at her before realizing I was probably being very awkward not doing anything, so I hurriedly bent down to pick up the glass with her. Then I saw it. The world seemed to slow and blur together. Flashes of red struck through my mind as I halted, staring at her wrist. This dragon was one of them. She had that bracelet, one with a flaming arrow. I blinked, stumbling over my claws as I backed up. Have they really followed me all the way here? At what point will they stop trying to kill me? I shook my head. It was impossible. I was sure that no one had seen me fly toward the kingdom when I left, and I definitely wouldn't have noticed this dragon in the crowd that had slashed at me. Perhaps this bracelet thing is a lot more widespread than I had realized. I looked at the dragon. She was humming slightly as she picked up the glass. She hadn't seemed very hostile to me earlier, so it's probably safe to help with the last few shards. I sighed and bent down to help her.
Oh, thanks!
The dragon laughed as though she hadn't noticed I was helping until just now, and perhaps she hadn't. She looked up at me. Her eyes were huge and looked like two brilliant suns. They had a distant, almost glassy look to them. She really was quite fascinating. The dragon swept the last pieces of glass into a strange bag before standing up and looking me up and down.
Whoa!
She said. Somehow her eyes got wider, and her jaw hung open slightly, looking at my wings, no doubt. I squirmed, not really sure what to do. It was obvious she was looking at them, but still I didn't know what to say or how to respond when she'd finally speak, and I didn't think this dragon would plainly leave after the compliment like all the others. She stared, for a long time. Too long. It felt like an eternity of her just staring, not moving an inch, not saying a single word, not doing anything, before she finally blinked and smiled warmly.
Your eyes are just starry,
she said. My mind halted all previous streams of thought. My eyes? Why my eyes? Of all hideous things, mismatched and terrifying. Thoughts spiraled through my brain. What? I whispered, my lungs seeming to vanish from my chest. She just chuckled.
Yeah, they look like mice.
She nodded, finally deciding that was the perfect description. My eyes pulled down. Everything this dragon says just confuses me more and more, I thought as she started up once again.
I had some mice once. Actually, I think one of them was a rat, but I didn't mind all that much. Shallow and Cattail. They were pretty funny, those two. But anyways, Shallow was a sandy brown color, but turned orange when the sun shone on him. And Cattail was such a sweet grey color, changed blue in the moonlight. Those two look just like your eyes, she said wispily. It was strange. I could listen to her talk all day. It was like her mindless prattle just put me in a trance. Half of it made no sense. But I didn't really care. I still had no idea what to say, but this dragon talked enough that I didn't need to. Oh, dull, she laughed. It was a strange expression, one that I've only heard used by a northerner that passed through my flock a while back. She must be from there. It would explain her unique appearance after all. Sorry, I'm dreadful with introductions, she smiled, her sun eyes beaming. I'm Phoenix. I halted, my brain prodding itself for the right words. I couldn't say Eclipse. That was a hideous name, disgusting in every way. But what to say? I never thought about it before. I just thought I was doomed to be Eclipse forever and ever until the day I died. But now I can choose who I want to be. Either way, I had to choose something quickly.
Aurora.
The necklace struck from within my mind, nearly making me jump. To be honest, I had forgotten it was there. Talking with a real dragon had forced my mind out of this strange necklace stuff. But yes, Aurora was a beautiful name, just about the opposite of Eclipse. I'm Aurora, I said after what must have been at least 20 seconds. Phoenix smiled, not seeming to notice how long it took me to say my name.
Aurora? Aurora? Aurora. Aurora ate my pancake. Aurora.
Phoenix muttered under her breath. What are you doing? I asked, slowly sliding backwards a step. Phoenix simply giggled in response. Just trying not to forget it, she said, hopping in place a few times. I stared at her, wondering if I should try to get away before she did anything else that might rub off onto me. But she continued immediately.
So, Aurora, where are you headed?
She asked, glancing around the bustling crowd ahead of us. Oh, I trailed off. I was supposed to be scouting the area, which I suppose meant looking for the palace, but I had no idea where that was. I'm really not sure where anything is around here,
You're new here.
she asked, and without waiting for as much as a nod, she continued.
Perfect. You can come with me then.
She bent down and picked up a box of jars.
I'm just gonna take these back to my cave, and then I can give you a tour of the marketplace.
She smiled eagerly. I stared at her jars, trying to remember if I had seen them earlier. I guess now I know it broke. Oh, I'm sorry about your jar. I lowered my gaze. He probably cared a lot about it. And then I come along and just knock it to the ground. So stupid. If I'd just been looking. Phoenix just chuckled, though.
Don't worry about it. I've got heaps of them.
And she walked away before suddenly remembering that I was there and looking over her wings at me.
You coming?
I laughed and shook my head slightly in disbelief at this dragon. Who is she? I thought joyfully as I followed her out of the bustling crowd. It took a while, but eventually the chaotic horde of dragons thinned out, and I was able to breathe again.
Finally!
Phoenix exclaimed when we escaped the crowd.
Buttons and quills, I hate that place. Dragons always looking down and moving rapid like that.
She growled, the noise kind of surprising me coming from her. I hadn't believed she was capable of being annoyed, or angry, or anything other than being in a constant state of optimism. It made sense now that I thought of it. Every dragon has emotions, but Phoenix was unlike anyone I'd ever met. It wouldn't surprise me if her emotions were strange too. Phoenix continued on with her disdain.
Nobody looks up anymore. It's so odd, don't you think? Because if you don't look up, you'll miss how beautiful the world is.
She laughed, her annoyance flipping on its side.
But then again, if it's too sunny, it's hard to look up, because then all you can see is just how delightfully bright it is.
I looked up at Phoenix. She went from happy to mad to happy in just 1 minute. Maybe her emotions are strange. I guess you're right, I said softly, looking down to the earth beneath us. Phoenix had a weird way of looking at the world. Like she didn't see anything at all, but she saw everything at the same time. She didn't seem to care what I thought of her either, which was interesting. How could she be so different and just enjoy that fact? It was like her only understanding of herself was from her eyes, and she liked the image. How I longed to be like that. Maybe one day I can be. Now that I have wings, it'll be easy.
But anyways, I'd much rather be out here than in that mess.
She laughed, gesturing back to the crowd of dragons. If you hate it so much, then why were you there? I asked. She shrugged, stretching her wings slightly.
Normally I do the sunrise ceremony at my nest, but I thought I'd go since it's the rite of daybreak.
I blinked in response. You have the sunrise ceremony in your nest? I asked, my head spinning with everything she had said. How? You need the sun in Kairos. I highly doubted that she had a large statue in her nest.
No, I just light a small candle and wait until it burns out. It gives me time to reflect on things.
She slowed around that last part, glancing down at her feathers. I noticed her brushing a small claw over one of her scribbled patterns, a little bit of it rubbing away. I stared for a moment longer. It's definitely not a natural pattern then. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. It's best not to press.
What were we talking about again?
Phoenix whispered absent-mindedly. And by whispered, I mean talk at a normal volume, because she was usually very loud.
Oh, right, the sunrise ceremony.
She said, shaking her head, her frill dancing behind her gracefully.
Since I live all the way at the very edge of the kingdom, traveling to the palace every morning is just too much of a hassle.
The palace? I asked, straightening and glancing around, fidgeting with the dirt as I walked. And where would that be? I trailed off, my pounding heart growing louder by the second.
Oh, Doe, you must be really new.
Phoenix chuckled, looking back in the direction we came from.
It's back a ways, all the way in the center of the kingdom.
I glanced behind us as well. Even the larger nests that were towering above us were barely visible, let alone a castle of any kind. So, what did you do for the rite of daybreak today? I asked, wondering what other traditions were different here.
I woke up, went to the wall, then to the palace, where the king gave the normal speech and such.
Phoenix shrugged, quickly brushing off the events of this morning and diverting her attention to a fluttering bug nearby. I tilted my head. The wall? What wall? In a moment I remembered that this was the kingdom. The wall would certainly be here. On the second day of the rite of daybreak, the westward wall of the kingdom fell to Kairos and his army, allowing the siege to continue into the heart of the kingdom. Back in the flock, Chief Lucian would normally gather the whelps together and show them the scrolls with images of the westward wall. Most of the time, though, I wouldn't get the chance to see the images since Lux always pushed me out of the way. But sometimes at night, I'd climb up to the living room and read them when everyone was asleep. I'd always have nightmares after that. We walked for about an hour, staying on the ground the whole time, not even a minuscule hover above the ground. I couldn't believe that more dragons weren't flying. In the flock, everyone flew everywhere, all the time, forcing me to be the only dragon on the ground. But here, everyone seemed to prefer walking. It was a little unfortunate that now that I had wings, I wasn't ever using them. But I guess it was okay. I was more comfortable walking anyway. We continued our trek to the edge of the kingdom, Phoenix babbling on about random things, somehow making them interesting. It was nice having someone to talk to for once. Eventually, we reached an area where the stone nests simply just stopped, and in their places rose much smaller one-room tents. Those must have been the tiny white dots I saw when flying here. Phoenix and I walked all the way down to the very edge of the kingdom before ending at a small tent that looked identical to all the other tents in its build, but drastically different in the area outside. For one, it was set up a tad bit farther back than the other tents on the row, so that it was nestled in with the trees. Plants wound around the strings of the tent, entwining everything in its wild nature. A dirt path paved through the green ground, marked by an open jar filled with old rainwater out front, and flanked on either side by a garden filled to the brim with cracked and scraggly plants. This must have been Phoenix's nest.
Wait here, I'll only be a bit,
She said, slipping through the thin flap leading into the tent, waiting a second before peeking her head back out.
Actually, it might take me a spell to find a place for these. How about you come in? Don't want you getting cold.
Cold? I thought. It's warmer here than my flock space in the summer. How would I get cold? I shook the thought off, though, and just walked through the flap, muttering something that sounded like, of course, except the words got all jumbled and cut off when I saw a glimpse of the interior. If there is one word that could describe the inside of Phoenix's nest, it would be jar. My goodness, she had so many things. A stark contrast to my room, which only had a broken mirror and a pile of candles. Here, jars filled every corner of the place, stacked on top of one another and pushed in piles against the tent wall. Some of the piles were organized, neatly placed and stacked tightly against one another, while others seemed as though a completely different dragon had piled them carelessly in a wild clump of glass and jar lids. Wilted plant pots hung from the ceiling with neglect, their dried-up leaves flaking off and falling to a pile on the floor. It took me a moment to see the other furniture in the room through all the jars, but there was a desk that was promptly covered with more jars, along with a couple scrolls, quills, and candles. Aside from that, there were only 2 straw beds. One of the beds was neatly covered with a fluffy leaf blanket, and the other was hardly even recognizable as a bed, and there were 12 knives stabbed deep into the straw. I stood petrified, staring at the beds as my heart twitched stronger in my chest. Why? I thought, fumbling over my claws as I took a small step backwards, almost running into another pile of jars. Why would she keep her knives lodged in this bed? Surely there was another place in here that she could put them. I looked closer at the knives. Some of them were bent far beyond use. Much better to just be thrown out. I shivered, clenching my eyes shut as I tried to turn my attention back to the jars and think about something else. I opened them, noticing a large box beside me at the door, and I quickly looked in, eager to take my mind off the knife-filled bed. It was filled to the brim with charcoal sticks. Ah, I looked at Phoenix, who was carefully placing her jars on the tippy top of a pile, her scribbly black pattern seeming to shift slightly, likely just from her movements, but it was still unsettling. I looked around the room once again, my eyes falling back to the bed. Stabbed with knives, in the middle of this jar-packed room, I squirmed slightly, inching towards the exit. What did I walk into? Why did she have so many empty jars? Why did she rub charcoal on herself? Why did she stab that bed with knives? My brain screamed with questions. That bed is dead now. She's a bed murderer. Are all dragons in this kingdom this crazy? My brain called out. If so, I'm not sure I'll survive long enough to kill the prince. My mind panicked at that thought, and I looked down to my claws. I forgot I still had to do that for a second. It seemed a little more barbaric now that I was here, in Sagara, actually talking to the people that lived here. Apparently they did believe in Kairos, so they weren't as evil as I thought, and other than this place being overcrowded, it didn't seem to be any worse than my flock. Actually, it seemed almost better. So far, everyone was nice. Well, at least Phoenix was nice, even though I was still a little scared she was a witch or something. I was sure she had good reasons for all of this insanity. I thought more about the prince, wondering what he'd be like. I hope he's really, really rude. I hope he really is the foulest beast in Kalandira, so I won't feel bad when I might do to him what Phoenix did to that bed. I looked up, the straw of the bed sticking out in random, jagged places, the knives slicing deep into them. I imagined the broken straw as bones and looked away immediately, scarring my mind with the image. Bad idea, bad idea. Get those terrible thoughts out of my head. Somebody, Kairos, please. I don't want to kill anyone.
Little Eclipse,
Necklace said, numbing my disgusting thoughts for a moment.
think about what I've given you. Your friendship, your power, your beauty. All because I gave you wings. You wouldn't want to lose that, now would you?
The brief moment of respite from my panic filled me with a tired bliss. Right, yes. I have to do this. There's no other way. No other way.
I'm almost ready, Aurora. I just have to make sure this jar is secure. Ah! That'll work. Let's go.
Phoenix said, flying down to greet me. Aurora? I paused, staring blankly at Phoenix for a second. Oh right, that's my name now. I closed my eyes and nodded. To some kind of market, right? I whispered. I'd never been to a market, but Lux sometimes would brag about what he'd get there over the migration. They joined a larger flock for the winter, one a little bit more south. Our sister flock. I've never gone, obviously, so its name always evaded my mind. Lux constantly talked about his friends there, and sometimes I wondered if he knew more about them than he knew about me. But now it was my turn. Already I had felt as though I had known Phoenix forever, and Lux was getting farther and farther away as I walked down the dirt path to the marketplace with Phoenix, my new friend. We passed tents, walking until we reached a little area right behind the first stone nests. You couldn't enter them from back here, as their doors were on the other side, and were blocked off by a small stone wall. This must be the marketplace. I was expecting the people here to be moving as quickly as they moved in the center of the kingdom, but dragons moved at leisurely paces, stopping on the sides of the dirt path to talk and laugh. Shops were set up in tents that had much wider openings than the nesting tents, and I could see all the way to the back when I looked inside. Some were filled with cloaks, others with bags, most of them like Phoenix's strange bag, which she had presumably emptied of all the broken glass.
Okay, we're here.
She said, looking around absent-mindedly.
Where do you want to go off to first?
She asked, still glancing around the market. I don't know what they have here, or where anything is, I said quietly, peeking into the shops as we passed.
Oh, right. Silly me.
Phoenix laughed.
Okay, let's just start here.
She strolled into the first shop on our right. It was filled with little knickknacks of all kinds. I bet Phoenix was enjoying herself, occasionally gasping and fanning me over to look at something. A copper jar, a tiny wooden chest, a strange-looking scroll, and a case made out of the same strange material as her bag. The items Phoenix pointed out always looked just like everything else in the store to me, but something about this specific one had made it more interesting to her. But I'd never really been one for things, especially ones that served no purpose, only just took up space on an unneeded shelf. So it was strange to watch her get excited about a rusty old key that probably didn't actually open anything. She got a couple of items, like the aforementioned key, as well as another jar, exchanging them for these strange little tokens that she pulled out of her weird bag. Phoenix would constantly ask me if I wanted anything, but I always shook my head. I wasn't much for little knickknacks. Eventually we got through the first couple of tents, Phoenix slowing us down quite a lot by talking to practically every dragon we passed. How does she know so many people? I wondered as I watched her waving, smiling, and talking with someone in the shops, all while still glancing around at the dragon-filled path outside. It seemed as though she never stopped talking.
Okay, I'm famished. Let's find some lunch.
Phoenix exclaimed, turning her attention back to me. Lunch? I asked, blinking. What's lunch? At that, Phoenix laughed, throwing her head back like I had just told a funny joke.
You're hysterical.
She shook her head, still laughing. I nervously laughed along with her. I didn't know what was so funny, but it's okay. I'm sure I could figure out what lunch is by myself. She said she was starving, so if this lunch involved getting food, I wouldn't be opposed. I hadn't had breakfast when I had landed this morning, so I was a little hungry. But even in the flock, most of the time we skipped breakfast and didn't have any food until dinner, because we hardly ever had any leftover game. Maybe if we had better hunters, it would have been different. I followed her all the way down the marketplace to wherever this lunch was. A couple of the shops had small signs that said, closed for lunch, and similar things. Whatever lunch was, it surely had to be a big deal around here. My guess is that it probably was some kind of meal similar to dinner, but for some reason it occurred in the middle of the day rather than later. Perhaps this was their dinner and they just went straight to bed without eating. So much was different here, it was hard to believe I was still on the same continent. I tried to talk to Phoenix a couple times, but I must have been too quiet because she didn't hear me and just kept looking around anxiously. I half wondered what she was looking for, but decided not to ask. Instead, I just turned my attention to the surrounding market as well. The shop tents had gotten more spread out now, and there were dragons on blankets with items sprawled out in front of them, just abandoning the tent altogether. Through the gaps between the tents, I saw strange lumps behind them, covered with sheets. I squirmed uncomfortably, getting the same feeling I got when I saw the knives sticking out of that bed. These lumps were oddly dragon-shaped. I diverted my gaze, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to find out what happened to those dragons, or why they were in the marketplace of all areas. I just kept my gaze on the ground until a wail pierced my ears. Across the path was a box containing baby dragons that were crying out for someone. The words, "Free whelps," were painted across the surface. I froze, staring at the terrible box, then at the sheet-covered lumps, the back of the box. My heart banged against my ribs. This wasn't right. I couldn't say nothing anymore. "Phoenix, what are those baby dragons doing in that box?" I whispered, unsure if this was some kind of secret that nobody was supposed to talk about. She turned towards me like she hadn't been paying attention.
Huh?
She asked, shifting her gaze over to where I was looking.
Oh,
Her tone changed instantly, getting dark and empty.
well, what else are we supposed to do with them? Nobody would take them if they cost Kalins, especially not if they'll just die anyways.
She paused and looked down, trying to sound as emotionless as possible.
The whole lot of them likely already have Nightingale's disease. The guards just have no proof yet.
I hadn't noticed until she had said the word guards, that there were indeed guards stationed about the market area, and likely everywhere else too. I turned back to her, shifting closer. "What's Nightingale's disease?" I asked, my gaze hovering on the lumps behind some of the tents. Phoenix turned her back to me, her claws scraping some of the dirt on the ground, causing a brief dust cloud to whirl in the air before the heavy dirt settled deeper into the floor. She slowly took a jar out of her bag, brushing a claw over its smooth surface, before gripping it tighter.
You don't need to worry about that.
She whispered, choking on her words slightly. It seemed as if time sludged forward slower in the moment that neither of us spoke, the charcoal marks on her tail seeming to shift with time. But then Phoenix's mood changed instantly.
Oh, look!
She said, putting the jar away and straightening up.
Lunch!
She hobbled over to another tent, with buckets piled high behind a tall counter. A line of dragons waited in front of us, leaving when they got a slate of food. Sure enough, lunch was some kind of meal. Phoenix turned to me.
What do you want?
She asked, forcing my brain into a small panic. I looked at the sign, options fluttering my brain. Oak-flavored squirrel, root-infused raccoon? Just get me whatever you're getting, I chuckled slightly. I wasn't used to deciding what I got to eat. Phoenix nodded and turned to the dragon behind the counter when it was our turn.
I'll take 2 birch fried rabbits with a side of roasted willow, please.
He nodded, and within minutes we were carrying our lunch off to a clearing filled with stone slabs, acting as tables. Phoenix started looking everywhere again, and at first I thought she was looking for a table to sit at. But in a whirl, she perked up, placed her food on a random one before leaving.
I'll be just a spell.
She muttered as she hovered over to a small grove of trees. She landed in front of a dragon playing some kind of instrument. He had the fluffiest feathers I had ever seen, and it was a soft cream color. His patterns were also very interesting. Tiny brown triangles at the tip of each feather, making him look like a walking optical illusion. I watched Phoenix and this dragon from afar, her interaction drastically different than how she talked with anyone else. She let him play his music, and let him do most of the talking. It was as though she was a completely different dragon around him. She still laughed the same amount, if not more. Honestly, if I didn't know how much Phoenix normally laughed, I would have thought that this strange dragon was just the funniest person alive. After a while, she returned, a dreamy look on her face, and randomly laughing at something in her head. I laughed along. "Who was that?" I asked with a smirk. Phoenix's face turned pale instantly when I said that.
Oh, that was no one.
She said with a hurried shake of the head. Right. I chuckled and turned my attention to the food that I still hadn't eaten yet.
Hey.
She laughed.
Fine, that's Luke. He's just someone from my old flock.
She waved a talon in his direction. I stared blankly at her when she had said that. I thought she was born here, and that her parents had migrated and never left or something like that. "You're not from here?" I asked.
Yeah, I used to live in the Frostburn flock.
So I was right. She is from the north, I thought before she continued.
Me and my mother came over with a group of dragons. Said it'd be better over here.
She stared at her for a while at her food, not moving, not blinking. I glanced around awkwardly. Then Phoenix randomly took a bite of her food, reminding me that I still hadn't eaten mine.
But yeah, I know nothing about you. Where are you from?
"Oh," I said, wondering if I should lie again, but then decided it was best not to make my whole identity a lie. "I lived in the Lightflare flock,"
Lightflare. Oh, that's close.
Phoenix exclaimed.
Buttons and quills. I thought you lived in the northern continent at least. There's a lot of people over there like you. That glow, I mean.
Phoenix laughed. I blinked. "That glow? didn't know that it was natural for dragons to glow. I've heard about glowing dragons in legends, of course, but I just assumed it was because they were heroic and did some good deed to earn it. But I guess that's why she didn't pay much attention to my wings. She took another bite of food. Right, food. The food looked interesting, to say the least. It was supposed to be rabbit, but I couldn't tell that that's what it was. They must have taken the fur off or something. There were also little flecks of stuff all over it. It kind of just looked like somebody had dropped it on the ground. The phoenixes looked the same, and she had no problem with it. So I dug in, taking the first bite. It was indescribable, by far the best food I'd ever had. It had layers of flavor bursting in my tongue in a strange, pleasant heat. The texture was strange too, but it wasn't bad. It was tender. Very different from the rubbery squirrels from my flock. I devoured it quickly, at least quick for me. I always ate my food slowly, so it probably just seemed like a normal pace. When I was done, I looked up at Phoenix, who was tracing her bracelet with her claw absent-mindedly. I stared at it too. I had forgotten she even had it. She was so nice and friendly to everyone, it was hard to connect her to all the claws that had torn at my feathers just yesterday. There was no denying its presence on her wrist. I stared, wondering if I should ask about it or not. What would I say? Excuse me, Miss Phoenix, have you killed any wingless dragons that might look a little bit like me recently? No, that's stupid. And where'd you get that scary bracelet of yours? No, she'd think I was a weirdo if I said that. My brain spiraled as it always did, drilling deeper into my mind until I lost all time and meaning. I eventually decided on something to say. After all, my curiosity was just too much for me to hold in. I had to know what it was. Hey, Phoenix, what does your bracelet mean? I asked. No, that was stupid too. It hadn't sounded so bad in my head, but hearing my own awkward voice saying it confirmed in my mind that it would have been better just not to say anything at all. Phoenix didn't react for a while, and for a second I thought she hadn't even heard me, until she shifted the bracelet out of my view. She looked up at me, her eyes somehow lacking any of the warmth it used to hold.
Nothing. It was just my mother's.
She said, completely devoid of any emotion whatsoever. I swallowed hard. I hated it when she got like that. She was scary, intense, feather-ruffling. And for the first time, I believed that Phoenix would do it. That she would stab beds over and over again with knives. And maybe even use them on more than just beds.
So, where are we going next?
She asked, looking up suddenly, her cheery disposition fluttering back. I was still petrified. I don't care, I said quietly. Anywhere you want to, I guess. I stood up, shaking my feathers so they'd stop standing on end. We just decided to go shop some more. Phoenix telling me more about Luke as we walked back to the market.
And then he just handed over his Joban, just like that. He let me play it for a little while. Obviously I was not good, but I felt like I was afloat far above the trees nonetheless.
She glanced sideways as we passed the shop.
Oh, sorry. I've got to get some things in there. One sec.
She went in, leaving me standing awkwardly by the door. I blinked and peeked my head into the shop. It was just a bunch of charcoal sticks. Why would she need more of those? She already has a whole box of them. I shook my head, laughing at how strange Phoenix was. I backed away from the shop, almost running into a mother dragon and her child. I sidestepped to avoid them, muttering sorry as I did. But then I stopped in my tracks, and she was rubbing charcoal on the little child's feathers. What is it with the charcoal? Phoenix came out of the shop, placing a small box of charcoal in her bag. I considered asking her about it, but I decided I would later. Wouldn't want her reacting the same way as she had about the bracelet. I shivered and just let her continue talking about random stuff. Luke was brought up multiple times, but then she always changed subjects to talk about things like stars or flowers or her dead garden. Eventually, I was able to push all of my questions to the back of my mind and just relish the feeling of someone talking to me. After a long time, the sun began descending through the sky, falling closer to the horizon, signaling the time when all the shops would close. Phoenix got some dinner, offering some to me, but I refused. I ate all I could at lunch, and I couldn't stuff another bite in my mouth, no matter how delicious. Apparently the dragons here have breakfast too. It was crazy how these dragons were able to eat 3 meals a day and not be so full they couldn't move until the sun was down.
Oh, Doe, look at the time.
Phoenix said, looking up at the setting sun after dinner.
This has been fun, but I really must get going now.
She stood up to leave.
See you.
She paused, squinting her eyes like she was thinking really hard about something.
What was your name again?
She whispered, leaning in. I blinked. What? How could she forget my name after spending a whole day with me? It's Aurora, I said, flabbergasted.
Aurora! That's right.
Phoenix laughed, throwing her head back.
Oh, Doe, I can't with myself sometimes.
She shook her head, turning to go.
Well, see you later, Aurora.
I chuckled after she left. She was insane, but that was what made her so wonderful. I stood up to leave as well, but then realized that I had nowhere to go. But right on cue, a soft mist permeated my mind.
Eclipse. Little Eclipse. It's time for you to meet the others. They will help you kill the prince. Stand up and follow my instructions very carefully.
The necklace whispered to me. I stood up nervously. I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I could just spend the rest of my life talking to Phoenix. Maybe make some more friends. But I had to kill the prince in order to do that. It'll only be for one moment. One fleeting little moment that will pass the second right after it comes. The necklace led me through the stone nest as the sun completely disappeared from the sky. The water inside the strange lanterns were glowing. I guess they weren't water after all, I thought as I traversed the empty passages. It was beautiful traveling through this place when no one was about, even if it was nighttime. But the light from the lanterns was enough for me to see where I was headed, until the necklace led me into a dark alley. The lanterns broken, and some of the stone nests around me were just crumpled to ruins. I knew I was close now. I could feel it in the dead air. I couldn't turn back.
Now, Eclipse. Find the building with an archway. At the keystone of the arch, there should be a symbol. Tell me if you find anything of the sort.
I nodded as the fog in my brain dissolved. There weren't many buildings here that had archways, so it would be easy to find. I looked around, but apparently it was a lot harder than I thought. It was just so dark that even with my glowing wings piercing the shadows, I couldn't see within them. I growled slightly. How hard was it to find a stupid archway?
Well, hello.
A voice called from behind me. I froze. At first I thought it was a necklace, but then realized that this voice was coming from outside my head. I whisked around, and in front of me was a dragon wearing a dark cloak that covered his eyes. I staggered back.
Oh, you don't need to be afraid. Actually, no, you do.
He came closer, narrowing his eyes. I stumbled up against the cold, hard edge of the nest behind me. My heart pounded. 1, 2. I felt a wave of pain echoing through my mind. 3, 4. Not again. 5, 6. Not again, not again. 7, 8. Not again, not again, not again. Please don't hurt me, I whispered, my voice broken and choking on tears. Images of Lux, the braceleted dragons, and of everyone else flashed in my mind. That was supposed to be over now.
Hurt you? I definitely could do that, yes.
My tail feathers.
But luckily for you, all I want to know is how a little dragon like you wound up on my side of the kingdom.
I'm just lost. I promise I'll leave, I cried.
You better.
He leaned in closer.
Or else.
He pushed hard on my ribs, his cloak lifting a little bit as he did, and in that brief moment I saw his eyes. His dark, terrible eyes. He had a deep scar over his left one. It was diamond-shaped and looked as though his eye bled into it, could have trapped me there forever. But he turned around in an instant.
Get lost.
He whispered. But I was already flying away, tears in my eyes. He didn't follow me, only stayed on the ground and backed into the shadows. As soon as I burst into the air, the necklace regained control and flew me straight to the archway. Why hadn't you done that before? I asked, tears spilling down my face as I doubled over my aching ribs.
It would have been wasted energy.
The necklace grumbled impatiently.
Now go in.
I glanced around. There was nothing on this wall other than the archway, and sure enough, the keystone there was a symbol I'd seen many times before. It was a symbol of a flaming arrow. Fear pierced my heart, but there was no way out of this. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and walked through the archway.